I've realized that the biggest problem I have in my life is me and my own imperfections. And the reason it's hard to work on ourselves is because it's such a problem. If we were to focus on ourselves and improving ourselves all day long, we'd have tons of work to do. We wouldn't have time to work on anybody else. But it's easier to try and work on somebody else than yourself because it's actually hard.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fascinating Womanhood channel, where we talk about everything that has to do with femininity and building strong, long-lasting, loving relationships. I'm Sherry Lynn, and I am here with my mom, Dixie Andelin Forsyth. Hi.
Hi.
So we're tackling a pretty big subject today. We get so many questions about this. It's almost like a daily question that we get. The problem with mothering your men.
The ones with the Imperial and we're running last?
I can't pass them on the curves.
Oh, go on, go ahead. Look, there's a space. Well, what are you waiting for, an engraved invitation?
Yeah?
I heard that.
I heard what, dear?
You know very well what. Lunch.
Nikki? What are you thinking about?
Harold! You had another drink when we were in the kitchen. I can tell by that funny look in your eye.
Take care of that throat. You're a big singing star now, remember?
Harold, how many times have I told you not to interrupt me when I'm talking?
No, let me be! Let me be!
You just can't do it that way. You just can't. If he don't want to come, you can't make him.
That's why men have to be controlled.
It's because mothering comes so naturally to us. That's where we are the mothers of the world. And whether we've ever had a physical child or not, we have that nurturing in us, and we tend to mother people, whether it's to give them advice when they didn't ask for it, tell them what they should be doing or shouldn't be doing. That's kind of mothering. And when it's unasked for is when it's more the mothering. You feel an obligation to teach them what's right or what's wrong, what they should be doing health-wise. You need to be doing this or you need to be doing that. And women are so natural to it that we have to actually deliberately not do it.
It sounds like what we're talking about is that natural nurturing deep down inside of all of us that we have, and maybe some more than others, but it's definitely natural. And I'm absolutely certain that it's natural because I've seen even my 3-year-old mother my husband or attempt to. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't do that because she's trying to manipulate him or anything like that. It's just natural. It's something that's inside all of us, whether we're aware of it or not. And it's not always necessarily a bad thing. And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the 3 most common reasons that we tend to mother. And then we're going to talk about the alternatives to mothering when mothering is actually becoming a problem in a bad way. Mm-hmm. And then we're also going to talk about when it's appropriate and when it can be very helpful to mother your men, which is kind of funny. So let's start with the 3 most common reasons why we might be mothering him. What's the first one?
Well, worried about him. Worried about him. His health, his food choices, his career choices.
I'm only thinking of Russell's condition.
You mean his financial condition, because that's the only condition that he has.
We're worried about him. Is he overweight? And we're worried that he's going to not live as long. Or we may be worried that he lacks some social skill and we feel a need to teach him. There's all kinds of things that we're worried.
I think worried is probably the most common one, especially on the surface. And it's not that it's becoming a huge problem, but it's probably a nuisance to him that he's feeling like, almost like this one can kind of be into the nagging territory too, because it's like you're mothering him but you're also kind of nagging him a little bit. And it all just stems from you worried about him, which is not a bad thing to be worried about him.
No, it's not an effective use of your core strengths.
Right.
Femininity.
We'll talk about what you can do as an alternative here in a minute, but let's talk about the next most common reason why we mother him.
we feel a need to control a certain situation. Like, for example, if he's not doing it correctly, whatever he's doing, he's not doing it right or good enough.
You know, a sense of control also, I think, has a lot to do with teaching him. We talked a little bit about that with worrying, but I think it more so comes about when you feel a need to control him or to control a situation and feel like, I have to teach him how to do this properly. And if I teach him, he will be better off. But really what you're coming across as, you're trying to control him and you're trying to mother him. And like you said earlier, he didn't marry his mother. He probably didn't want to marry someone like his mother.
And you don't want to marry, and you didn't want to marry a child either.
Right. Hopefully not.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of man babies and women babies out there, but most of us don't want to marry someone that is a perpetual child.
And then the last one.
It kind of bleeds into the one above. We feel a need to protect ourselves, like in the driving situation. If he makes his poor choice, he may get fired.
Right.
We may die in a car accident, or he may lose his friends, or any of those things. You know, we're protecting us, our livelihood, our home, our social standing, all of it.
You're worried that if you don't step in, it's going to fall back on you and you're going to be left holding the bag. And this one can be really serious. This one can even be, you know, a man. I know we talked about health in the beginning, but I think that was more like on the surface. This could be a more deeper issue. Like if you're worried that he has these serious health issues, and if he doesn't change some of his life choices, it's going to fall back on you someday because you'll be left without him. That can be really hard and very, those are some real fears that you might be tackling. And it's
well,
tough.
We didn't mention it before, but religion. Religion is very personal and deep to people. And if your spouse either is interested in it or loses interest in it or decides to go in another direction, that can be very frightening. You may feel like his eternity is affected. So,
yes. Mm-hmm.
So what do you do then? If you say to yourself, but this is important, so this is different. The problem with that is the results are pretty well always the same, whether it's you're worried that he's going to die or you're worried he's going to be in poor standing with God. He's not going to appreciate it. That's the bottom. There isn't a case where, well, this is important, the others aren't, so I need to intervene. It's how you handle it and what you do, and how you handle it doesn't necessarily have to be mothering.
Right. And we did a video on feminine influence that would be really good to watch when you're done with this one, as well as feminine speech and tone. That would be a really good video to watch after watching this one, because it can help you in how you're approaching things. But really what we wanted to talk about in this one is just that general kind of concept of mothering, why it can be really harmful, and how to kind of combat it.
Well, what if you notice he's getting into drugs? And that'll definitely affect you. Pornography. But see, there's always boundary setting and things you can do that's a mature adult thing that is not mothering, that's still feminine.
The thing with mothering is that it most of the time just doesn't work.
Right.
It makes you look like the fool. I hate to say it, but you're the one that's going to look bad in the end. And I swear, if we had a camera on ourselves and the way we talk to our guys sometimes.
Don't stop! Keep moving! Mother!
Don't you think we should stop for the
big, stupid, loud, he's the one that ran into us. Go on, keep moving!
I'm sure most of us would shudder a little bit. We don't really realize that we're doing
We very quickly change it if we could see it.
Yes. And I think we've all done this, right? I've done it. You've done it. We've all done it. And it's something you constantly might have to kind of think about if you have a habit of it. But
that's why we know about it, because we've done it.
But you can absolutely improve upon this area. And I'm not saying eliminate it. It might not ever go away, because you just, after all, need to nurture, but you can absolutely get better at it.
Well, yeah, you can learn what works and what does not work. And by work, I don't mean manipulate. I mean that alternatives and boundary setting. For example, if your man is into pornography, drugs, all kinds of stuff, you have a right and an obligation to set boundaries about what you will and will not accept. But nagging never works. Mothering doesn't work with a man like that.
So we're going to go into 3 alternatives that you might be able to choose instead of mothering. If you find yourself doing this constantly, you're watching this and you're going, oh my gosh, I do all those things and I didn't even realize it. So the easiest way to change bad habits, we've said it so many times, is to replace them with a better habit instead of just stopping. You know?
It doesn't work too good either.
Yeah. So what's the first alternative?
Have a heart-to-heart but loving conversation with him about if you're worried about something. Instead of you need this and you need that. When you're having a heart-to-heart, focus on your feelings instead of accusations. Because if you accuse, he'll automatically put up a defense, which you don't want. If you say, I feel bad, I'm, I feel insecure, I feel worried, I feel, in other words, own it all yourself instead of you make me feel, isn't helpful. It's an accusation. All of us put up a defense when we're accused.
Accusing can be really a recipe for disaster, especially if it's serious. If it's really serious, I think it's just all about presenting your feelings in a very loving, like you said, in a very loving way. And this may not be the answer to your everyday mothering. This might be something a little bit more on the serious side, like what we mentioned earlier. You're worried about your well-being, about something more serious. I'm sure you're not going to have a heart-to-heart with him about his driving. Maybe you will, but that's a little bit more the everyday kind of nitpicky stuff.
Can I tell you from experience, it doesn't work?
Well, we keep saying
have a heart-to-heart about driving because
he's just going to get
different styles. We have different styles of driving, and at some point, you just have to let some things go. You cannot goal set to make him change his driving habits in any way, shape, or form, and be assured that he ever will. At some point, you have to just.
The same thing goes with food and health. If you sit him down and you're like, I'm just really worried about your health, because that can be more serious too. I just think you just have to be really careful about those kind of things, because you can really hurt his feelings if you tell him that you think he's like overweight, or I don't know. You can't force him to change his diet. You can't force
First of all, if he's overweight, he knows it. So you don't need to inform him.
Yeah.
He looks in the mirror every day. He takes a shower. He knows. So you're not informing him of something that he is unaware of.
Maybe it's a habit that you don't like that he does. Maybe he's late all the time. He's always late. I'm always late for this. I'm always late for that. And you feel the need to get him on time, like a little boy going to school. I don't think that's going to necessarily be a sit down heart to heart, but it could be. It just depends. All these things are so situational.
From personal experience, when you were saying that, I always took longer to get, I still do, always take longer to get ready than he does, because it's a makeup to put on for one thing. And his hair is just, So I was always later than him for like a church meeting.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of our marriage, he would get kind of impatient with me. But after a while, he just learned to ask me, is there anything I can do to help? Like with our kids or something. And he just decided, I guess, at some point to just not stress about it. If 1 or 2 minutes late, it is not earth shattering. And you know what? I'm not late anymore.
But you know what? He does not feel that need to nurture you. And it's
right.
And this is an example of where that way of thinking has actually helped diffuse something that could have been really tense between you two. And if it had been the flip side and he was the one taking a long time getting ready for church and you are waiting on him, it's probably much more difficult for you to do what he did, which is, how can I help? But you can't. You absolutely
you can. And if you can see he's just getting himself ready, you obviously can't help. The next thing to do is accept him at face value and just say, in the scheme of life, this is not a big deal.
Okay, so that's the heart to heart. What about another one?
It'd be a good example. If it's, for instance, his health, cook healthier meals. Eat healthier meals yourself. Go on walks and invite him to come with you without saying you need to do this. Just say, hey, I'd really, could you come with me? I'd really love it if it's a little alone time together. You can be a good example.
And don't do it hoping he will. Oh, if I do this,
he'll know.
Start doing this, because that's called manipulation.
And he'll know. It's foolish
of
us to think he's not gonna know. He'll know. He'll feel it.
Yeah, this one isn't about if I do this, he'll change. This one is about what you can do instead of mothering / nagging him. That's a good one. What's the next one?
Take action yourself. For example, if you're worried about him with health problems, you might consider going back to school and getting some kind of a career yourself, so in case something happens, you can take over. And that allows you to not be as stressed every day about him having health problems, not maybe taking care of himself enough, according to what you think. And you can do something for yourself to make your life more stable for the future.
Absolutely. I think any kind of action that you can do to move forward that has to do with you, and this is going to be different for everybody, but focusing on yourself and not focusing on him. And I know that's hard because we're talking about everyday little annoyances. Let's say it's the driving again, going back to the driving, and you don't like the way he drives. You can offer to drive.
And if you offer to drive, don't say it right after you've obviously made it clear you don't like the way he's driving. Just say, hey, do you mind if I drive? I'd love to take a turn.
I'd love to drive today, because you know what? Maybe you do feel terrified when he drives. Maybe he literally scares you when you drive. There's nothing wrong with saying something like that for yourself and saying, would you mind if I drove today? I kind of enjoy it. It will help you. It's way better alternative than mothering him while he's driving. So
right.
It's an option. I think the take action for yourself means don't just sit back and just, sit there in this pool of, do something. Something.
I've realized that the biggest problem I have in my life is me and my own imperfections. And the reason it's hard to work on ourselves is because it's such a problem. And so if we focus on ourselves, if we were to focus on ourselves and improving ourselves all day long, we'd have tons of work to do. We wouldn't have time to work on anybody else. Mm-hmm. But it's easier to try and work on somebody else than yourself because it's actually hard.
Right.
Managing your health, balancing that with exercise, balancing that with, even more important, your relationships with others. Mm-hmm. Like you talked about being fearful of the driving. Maybe I'm fearful theoretically of his driving because of something that happened in my past and not because he is an unsafe driver. Mm-hmm. He isn't always in accidents or things that maybe I just am such a high-strung person that when he only has one hand on the wheel instead of two, I'm too nervous. Maybe it's me.
Maybe you need to, have a device in your hand when he's driving and try to distract yourself. Maybe you need to be focusing on other things. Just try other things. Take action for yourself. Try other things that will help you. Like, I love what you're saying about working on yourself, because that is really hard.
It is hard. That's why it's easier to focus on someone else. But if we work on us, we got a lot of work to do. At least I do. And it never will end. Focusing on him will make things worse and will not work.
And the next one is practice acceptance. Now, we did an entire video on acceptance, so we're not going to go on and on about really deeply what that means, but basically it's just accepting him for who he is and his flaws and not trying to change him. And this is more of like a constant thing that you're studying and practicing.
Well, some of his flaws may not actually be flaws at all. They may just be habits that annoy us, mm-hmm. which isn't necessarily a flaw, because we're not the decider of all things that are right, so it may be the way he chews or something. It isn't a right and wrong thing, but it's just who he is. And we all want to be accepted for who we are, all of us. This isn't just a man thing. I do, you do. I mean, as I'm getting older, I like that he accepts me for being older, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm really grateful when he accepts me, so I can accept others as best. It's a lifelong working on it thing, especially with other people that might annoy you, but accepting him like the way he drives, and just that's who he is, and I'm not changing him.
And the last one, we also did a video on this, so I'm sorry to have to put so many videos, but I think each one of these are just so deep. Every single subject we're talking about, it gets really, really deep. So we did a video on this one, but then the last one is practicing girlish responses.
And girlishness, I can't say enough about when it's appropriate to use it, how magical it can be. It can diffuse those situations. when he clearly is being either thoughtless, usually it's thoughtless, grumpy, or just little things like that. And I don't mean eating with his mouth open. That's not thoughtless. That's just a habit. That's where we need to accept it.
I don't know that this one is always appropriate, but it can be. And I think the only times I can think that this one really wouldn't necessarily be the best choice is when it comes to more serious issues, such as his health. I don't know that the girlish response is going to
No, it's not appropriate.
for those. I think the girlish response is more appropriate for the situations that are a little bit more on the surface every day.
Yeah, they're everyday, surface, thoughtless, just human nature.
The small little everyday annoyances.
Well, you also don't want to do it if he's maybe says things inappropriately socially.
I think it's more about like him being a little thoughtless, and instead of you mothering him as a response, like, oh, you should watch what you're saying, you know, or you might want to think about how you're talking to me. Like I hear those things all the time from ladies, or they might say, your mother should have raised you better, or something like that.
Oh,
that sounds
really
like
bad.
But instead of saying those things, that's where I think girlishness can come in and be like, oh my, you know.
You don't even remember our anniversary anymore.
Is it today?
Oh, no, it's not today.
You know, like if he just said something that hurt your feelings, you can come up with cute little.
Instead of instructing him or raising him, you come back with something that the love of his life would say.
Right. Something kind of sweet and almost humorous might remind him, oh, what did I just do? You know, it might remind him that like, oh, maybe that wasn't the.
And most of the problems we have are the superficial, not the big ones. Those don't usually occur daily or even weekly, but they're the smaller things. That's why I like girlishness so much, because it is a regular thing, because people are human and they make mistakes. It's for mistakes and errors, not for anything that you're seriously worried about him, like you've gotten into drugs or pornography. You don't handle that way.
Okay, so now that we've gone through all of the alternatives, what about if it's ever okay? When is it okay to mother him?
Well, interestingly enough, I have observed in my life that the only time when Bob likes me to mother him is when he's sick or injured.
Oh, Gerald! Oh, honey, are you all right? Oh, darling. Darling.
That's it.
Yes.
Now, I have a brother who's getting surgery this week, and so he's not married, so he's going to stay with me. Now, he's a physician, but he likes it when I'm kind of pamper him when he is physically down. He had a tooth pulled once and stayed with me. He likes that.
You're not talking about, now you need to go to bed at this time. And
No.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, I brought you some soup. Would you like this?
I'm talking about on my brother changing his bandage, even if he's a physician and knows perfectly well how to change it himself. It's pampering, not scolding.
You're nurturing someone that truly needs to be nurtured. Whereas what we were talking about earlier is mothering someone that isn't sick and doesn't need you, is grown up and doesn't need your instruction in that way.
Men tend to appreciate that nurturing at that time, where you pamper them and say, can I get you anything? Would you like this or this? And kind of making
some more than others. Some more than others.
But I don't think that's a time to say, be a man and buck up.
Right.
Don't be such a wimp or any of those kinds of, well, it's never appropriate to say that.
What about if he asks you subconsciously to mother him? I'm just going to bring up the late thing again, because I think that's an easy one to relate to, because we don't really have like a specific story. But what if he says, I'm always running late for church, or I'm always running late for whatever it is. Can you remind me about the time? What do you think about that?
I don't really like that. I would say, I'll try, but I'm not very good at remembering. So you probably ought to set your phone or your alarm or something, because I may forget.
Why do you think a man would ask that of his wife? Or, why would he
want to take the responsibility?
So that's a man.
Maybe his mother did it all the time for him, and it's what he's used to. It's not good for him. You don't have to do it just because a guy asks you. if it's not appropriate, or it suddenly puts you in the position of having to take responsibility for something you can't really take responsibility for, then you can just say, well, I'll try, but I can't guarantee anything because I'm not very good at it either. Just in a very feminine way, hand it back to him. It's something he should be doing.
I think if a man is subconsciously asking you to mother him and he maybe doesn't really realize it, if he does realize it, I think that's a whole other thing. That's a different video. But I think if he's subconsciously kind of asking for you to pick up the some of his slack, I guess, I think you need to be careful how you respond, because we've had ladies say things like that and say, hey, my husband asked me to basically mother him. And I said, well, I'm not your mother. And I think you need to be careful,
no.
because that kind of response can not only get you into an argument, it can make he'll be insulted, and it also doesn't lead to romance. And that's what we're always talking about with Fascinating
Womanhood. It doesn't work. We always go back to that. Go with what is effective and what helps your relationship, not what damages it.
So I think if you could respond in a way, and again, with the late thing, you said, I'll try, but I'm not very good at it. That's a great response. And it's easy for anyone. Even if you're irritated, you can say that, and it's not disrespectful. It's not
disrespectful, but it's also saying in a very subtle way, I realize this is your thing. I'll help you if I can, but I'm not taking full responsibility because it's not mine. And you might remember sometimes, but what if you don't?
Well, and it's not romantic to be someone's mother. I mean, at least in my that's not how I would envision a really great, long-lasting 50+ year marriage, is that you're constantly mothering him. I mean, that just sounds so sad.
Well, he's not really. He's not the best he can be if he needs to marry someone who is just another version of his mother who passed away or something. It's not good for him. It's not good for us. It's not good for anybody. And when we picture the man of our dreams, this man who's protecting us and taking care of us and is kind of a warrior spirit, that guy isn't going to want someone to say, now it's past your bedtime, and that isn't what we want. It's not attractive to us, and it certainly isn't good for him.
In conclusion, what we're trying to say here, because we're coming to the end, is that the whole point of working on this is your goal is to have a more romantic marriage that lasts. And mothering is going to get you into a bit of a trap of bad habits, and he will resent those things over time. This is just one thing that we all do, that we just, like we said in the beginning, it's natural, and we don't mean it to be harmful. We don't mean it to be, at least most of us don't. But the goal here is to have a more romantic marriage, and you can't have a very good romantic marriage if you're constantly being a mother to your husband. So this has been really helpful. I hope everyone else feels like it's helpful. I know this is a really, really big topic, and there could be so many different examples of this. So if you have any questions about it, I know it's hard to ask questions about these kind of things because it can get really personal, but we can also include our email down below this video if you wanted to email us and keep it more private. But go ahead if you feel comfortable dropping something down below about what works for you, any questions that you have in general about mothering.
And don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, we're here every week. If there are any other topics that you'd like us to cover, comment those down below too. I know we touched on several topics today that kind of go hand in hand with mothering, so feel free to drop those down below as well. We have links to all of Dixie's books and workbooks attached to this video. If you haven't read her book, you absolutely need to read it. It will go so much more into all of these things that we've talked about and explain so much more. We're also on social media very actively. All of those links are included in this video, so definitely check those out. And we're here every week, so hit subscribe, hit like, so you know when our videos will come out. And we will see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.